The night did not arrive all at once, but rather settled gently, like a shawl drawn slowly around the shoulders of the world. It began with the soft dimming of color along the quiet road that curved toward a small village at the edge of the forest, where the last traces of dusk lingered in pale blues and muted violets, and where the air itself seemed to slow, growing cooler without becoming cold, carrying with it the scent of pine needles, old wood, and a faint sweetness from late-blooming flowers that only opened when the sun had fully stepped away. Lanterns were being lit one by one, not in any hurry, but with the calm assurance of a ritual that had been repeated for generations, each flame cupped carefully in glass, each wick catching with a soft sigh, until the village appeared to glow from within rather than from any single source of light, as though warmth had taken root in the earth and was gently breathing upward. At the far end of the road stood an inn that had been there longer than anyone remembered clearly, its beams darkened with age, its windows curved slightly, imperfect in a way that felt comforting, and above its door hung a modest sign carved from pale wood, smoothed by countless winters and summers, bearing no name, only the simple image of a lamp resting on a table, its flame steady and calm. Inside, the hearth was already alive with quiet fire, not roaring or snapping, but breathing slowly, its embers glowing a deep, patient orange, sending waves of warmth across the stone floor and into the heavy wooden chairs arranged in no particular order, as if they had settled where they pleased. The innkeeper moved softly, their steps unhurried, their presence as gentle as the light itself, placing mugs on tables, straightening a folded blanket here, adding another log to the fire there, all without sound beyond the faintest creak of floorboards that seemed to sigh in appreciation rather than complaint. Outside, the village had begun to rest. Doors were closed not with finality, but with trust, shutters drawn halfway to let moonlight in, and somewhere a bell chimed the hour, low and rounded, its echo drifting across rooftops before dissolving into the trees. At the forest's edge, where the village ended and the world grew wilder, the path narrowed, its stones worn smooth by feet that had walked it over many lifetimes, and it was there that a solitary figure walked slowly, not lost, not searching, but simply moving forward because the road was there, and because the night felt kind. Their cloak was simple, its fabric softened by use, and beneath it they carried nothing heavy, only a small satchel that held little more than bread, a book with blank pages, and a smooth river stone that fit comfortably in the palm, warmed by the body and familiar to the touch. They paused at the edge of the forest, listening. The trees whispered quietly, not in words, but in the gentle language of leaves brushing against one another, of branches shifting under their own weight, of distant night creatures settling into their rhythms, all of it layered and calm, like a song without a beginning or an end. The moon had risen high enough now to cast silver patterns along the path, illuminating moss and roots, catching on spiderwebs strung carefully between low branches, each thread beaded with moisture that shimmered faintly before fading back into shadow. There was no need to hurry. The road would wait, and the night had plenty of room. Eventually, the figure turned back toward the village, guided not by intention so much as by the warm glow of the inn's windows, which shone softly through the gathering dark, promising nothing more than rest, and therefore offering everything. The door opened with a familiar sound, a low, rounded creak that seemed almost like a greeting, and warmth spilled outward, wrapping around cold fingers and tired shoulders, carrying with it the scent of bread just baked, of herbs steeping in hot water, and of wood smoke that clung gently to the air without overwhelming it. Inside, only a few others remained, each settled into their own quiet moment. One sat near the hearth, eyes closed, hands wrapped around a mug, breathing slowly as if matching the rhythm of the fire. Another leaned over a small table by the window, tracing shapes in the condensation on the glass, watching as the village lights blurred and shifted beyond, their thoughts clearly untroubled by urgency or worry. No one spoke, and no one felt the need to. The innkeeper nodded once, a simple acknowledgement, and gestured toward an empty chair near the fire, where a blanket had been folded neatly, waiting. The figure removed their cloak, hanging it on a wooden peg worn smooth by countless others, and settled into the chair, letting the warmth seep in, easing muscles that had grown stiff not from hardship, but from long familiarity with motion. The firelight danced across the room, painting slow-moving patterns on the walls and ceiling, rising and falling with each quiet shift of flame, and for a while, nothing happened at all. And that was enough. Time in the inn did not behave the way it did elsewhere. It stretched, softened, lost its sharp edges, and became something more like a gentle tide, ebbing and flowing without demanding attention. The mug placed into waiting hands was warm, its contents simple and steady, tasting faintly of chamomile and honey, with just a hint of something earthy beneath, grounding and reassuring. With each sip, the world seemed to settle further, as if layers of noise and tension were being carefully peeled away, leaving only what was essential: warmth, light, breath. Outside, the forest responded to the deepening night. An owl called once, then again, not sharply, but with a rounded softness that carried far before fading. Somewhere closer, a small animal moved through fallen leaves, its passage marked only by a brief rustle before stillness returned. The moon climbed higher, its light shifting slowly across the inn's windows, then across the road, then toward the fields beyond, tracing its own unhurried path across the sky. The figure by the fire opened the book they carried, though its pages were blank, and ran a finger lightly across the paper, not to write, but simply to feel the texture, the faint resistance beneath the skin, the promise of words that did not yet need to exist. They closed it again, content to let thoughts drift without direction, to let memories rise and fade without attachment, like reflections on water disturbed by a passing breeze. Across the room, the innkeeper moved again, dimming one of the lanterns, then another, until the light was softer still, concentrated around the hearth and the few remaining lamps, each flame steady and calm. No one noticed the change immediately, and when they did, it felt natural, as if the room itself had decided it was time to rest. Eventually, one by one, the others rose quietly, offering nods instead of words, gathering cloaks and small bundles, making their way up the narrow staircase that led to rooms above, where beds waited beneath slanted ceilings, quilts thick and heavy, windows cracked just enough to let in the cool night air and the distant sounds of the village settling fully into sleep. When the room had grown nearly empty, the figure by the fire remained, not out of reluctance to leave, but out of simple presence, content to be exactly where they were. The fire burned lower now, its embers glowing steadily, and the shadows it cast were longer, softer, less defined, moving slowly across the floor like gentle waves. At last, the innkeeper approached, placing a small oil lamp on the table nearby, its flame tiny but unwavering, then gestured toward the stairs, not as a command, but as an invitation. The climb upward was slow and easy, each step familiar, each turn known by heart even to those who had never walked it before. The room at the top was small, but complete, with a bed tucked beneath the slope of the roof, a wooden chair by the window, and a simple shelf holding nothing but a folded cloth and a small bowl of water that reflected the lamplight like a quiet pool. The figure set the lamp down, removed their boots, and lay back, letting the weight of the blankets settle over them, heavy enough to feel secure, light enough to breathe beneath. Outside the window, the village was nearly dark now, only a few distant lights remaining, scattered and soft, and beyond them the forest stretched outward, its edge blurred by shadow, its presence felt more than seen. The night had fully arrived. Breath slowed, thoughts softened, and the steady sounds of the world, fire settling, wind moving through leaves, the distant call of night birds, wove together into a gentle tapestry that held everything in place. There was no need to think of what would come next. The road would still be there in the morning, the forest unchanged in its quiet watchfulness, the inn warm and welcoming as it had always been. For now, there was only this moment, complete and untroubled, wrapped in the last warm light before sleep carried everything softly onward.